Husband confessed that he cheated on me with my sister at our favorite restaurant where I was going to tell him that I was finally pregnant after 5 years of trying. My husband confessed that he cheated on me with my sister at our favorite restaurant where I was about to tell him that I was finally pregnant after 5 years of trying. Henry and I have been married for 5 years now. I thought our marriage was going great until, out of nowhere, my husband confessed to having an affair with my freaking sister. You see, we're both doctors, and while that might seem glamorous or fulfilling to outsiders, it also brings its own set of complexities into our relationship. The long hours, the emotional toll of caring for patients, and the fact that we are both deeply passionate and good at what we do means that our marriage hasn't always been picture perfect. Balancing our careers with personal time has been tough, and there have been moments when the weight of our jobs made things more difficult. But through it all, we've managed to support each other. He is my partner, and I never had a shred of doubt in my mind that I would be spending the rest of my life with him. In fact, 2 months ago, I discovered that I was pregnant. When we first got married, Henry and I were eager to start a family. We tried for a while, but despite our hopes and best efforts, it just never happened for us. Eventually, we made peace with it. We stopped actively trying, telling ourselves that if it was meant to be, it would happen in its own time. Letting go of that dream was hard, but we poured our energy into our careers and our relationship, trusting that fate would guide us. So, when I suddenly started experiencing morning sickness, I didn't immediately jump to conclusions. Part of me thought it might just be stress or something related to work, but I decided to take a pregnancy test anyway just to rule out the possibility. When the result came back positive, I was completely floored. It was such an overwhelming moment, full of disbelief and excitement. I never thought that after all these years, I would find myself staring at that little test, realizing I was going to have a baby. The emotions washed over me in waves, and I had to sit down to process the reality that I was actually pregnant. It was a mix of joy and wonder. At that moment, my first thought was to share the news with Henry. I knew how much this would mean to him after everything we'd been through. But at the time, he was away, attending a series of medical conferences. This news was too important to be shared over the phone or through a quick text message, so I decided to wait until he returned so I could tell him face to face. I knew that seeing his reaction in person would make the moment all the more meaningful. The day Henry was supposed to come back from his trip, I had everything planned out perfectly. I wanted to make the moment special to celebrate the incredible news that I was pregnant. I had arranged a lunch for us at our favorite restaurant, the one we always went to for important occasions or when we just needed some time to ourselves. It was a place that held a lot of memories for us, quiet, cozy, and full of meaning. I imagined the joy and surprise on his face when I told him the news, thinking of how this moment would be the start of a new chapter in our lives. When I went to pick him up at the airport, though, I could immediately sense that something was off. Henry looked preoccupied, almost lost in thought. He didn't greet me the way he usually would. There was no warm hug, no excitement in his eyes at seeing me after being apart for a while. He barely even said hello, and I could feel the distance in his demeanor. I tried to brush it off, thinking maybe the long flights or the stress of the conference had taken a toll on him. I mentioned the reservation at our favorite restaurant, hoping that it would lift his mood and give us a chance to reconnect. But to my surprise, he sighed, visibly irritated, and said we should probably cancel and just head back home. His tone was sharp, almost as if he were annoyed at the idea. I was taken aback by his reaction. I mean, it wasn't like we had any other major plans for the day, and I thought a nice lunch together would be just the thing to help him unwind. I reasoned with him, saying that since we'd probably end up ordering takeout anyway, it would be better to enjoy a quick lunch out and then head home. He sighed exasperatedly and gave me a curt nod. Then, as if I weren't even there, he went back to looking at his phone, scrolling absent-mindedly while I drove us to the restaurant. By the time we got there, the energy between us felt heavy. We took our seats at the table, but Henry hardly spoke a word. Wanting to ease the tension, I asked him about the conference, hoping to spark some conversation, but his responses were short, cold, and distant, just one-word answers that didn't lead anywhere. It was so unlike him. Normally, after these trips, he would share stories about the people he met, the interesting talks he attended, or the new ideas he came across. But this time, it felt like he was holding something back, and I couldn't help but wonder what was really going on. To be fair, I had noticed a slight shift in Henry's behavior in the past few weeks before our lunch that day. He had started growing distant, and while part of me was concerned, I chalked it up to the usual stress that comes with being a doctor. Our jobs are demanding, often leaving us mentally and physically drained, so I obviously didn't think much of it at first. We had both been through rough patches before due to the pressures of work, and I assumed this was just another one of those times. I kept telling myself that he would eventually open up once things settled down, that his mood would improve after his conference, and that we'd get back to normal. But sitting across from him at lunch that day, watching him barely acknowledge me, hardly speak, I began to feel more and more uneasy. Still, I tried to push the nervousness aside. I had waited long enough to tell him about the baby, and despite the tension between us, I was desperate to share the news. I thought, maybe, just maybe, hearing about the pregnancy would snap him out of whatever was bothering him, and we could find joy in this life-changing moment together. But just when I was about to gather the courage to tell him, to share the happiest news of our lives, Henry looked up from his plate. His voice was low and steady when he said the words I never imagined hearing. "I've been cheating on you." At first, I didn't even register what he said. The restaurant was noisy, with conversations and clinking dishes all around us, and for a second, I thought I had misheard. I let out a nervous laugh and asked, "What?" as if his words had been some kind of mistake. But then he looked me in the eyes, something he hadn't really done all day, and repeated himself, this time more clearly, with an emotionless, almost detached tone. "I've been sleeping with your sister." In that moment, the world around me seemed to stop. My face went numb. My husband was sleeping with my sister Lexi of all people. My sister. I stared at him, my mind struggling to grasp the meaning of his words. I asked him again, "What do you mean?" Though deep down, I already knew. I didn't want to believe it, but the look on his face left no room for doubt. He just sat there, staring straight at me with an expression so cold and emotionless, like this was just another fact he was stating, something casual and insignificant. There was no remorse, no sign of the man I thought I knew, the man I had loved and trusted for all these years. It felt like everything I had known, our marriage, our bond, even my own sister, was crumbling right in front of me, and I was powerless to stop it. My eyes began to well up with tears. I could feel the sting of betrayal deep in my chest. With a trembling voice, I asked him, "When did it start?" I needed to know. I wasn't sure why, but some part of me hoped that maybe this was all a mistake, a misunderstanding. He began to tell me, almost casually, how he and Lexi had been sleeping together for the past few months. My heart sank further with each word he said. It all started after Lexi had broken up with her last boyfriend. She was devastated after the breakup and had started coming over to our place frequently for support. I remember those days vividly. I had welcomed her into our home, wanting to be there for her during such a tough time. She was my sister, and I thought we were helping her heal. But little did I know, behind my back, Henry and Lexi were getting closer in ways I could have never imagined. Yes, they had always been friendly. In fact, I remember thinking at the time how nice it was that my husband and my sister got along so well. It gave me comfort knowing that we were all so close as a family. But never in my wildest nightmares did I think they were that close, that they were sleeping together. I couldn't process the enormity of it, the betrayal from both of them. As Henry continued to speak, explaining his affair, I felt everything around me start to blur. I didn't want to hear him anymore. Nothing made sense. My stomach turned and, used for years. I felt a surge of anger and a need for answers as I unlocked it and scrolled through his messages. What I found made my heart drop further into my stomach. There were texts between him and my sister, Lexi. Not just casual messages, but intimate ones. The kind of messages that made it clear their affair was not just a one-time mistake. They had been planning things, meeting up, and exchanging personal, secretive messages. It was all there in black and white. I read through everything, not sure if I was punishing myself or if I just needed the truth in its entirety. The pain was unbearable, but I couldn't stop. As I continued to read, I felt a strange numbness take over me. I had expected betrayal, but the depth of it, the fact that it was happening with my own sister, made it feel surreal. The betrayal wasn't just from Henry anymore. It was from Lexi too. How could she do this to me? How could she betray the trust we had as sisters? I must have been sitting there for hours, staring at the phone in my hand, replaying the words in my head over and over again. When I heard Henry stir from the couch, I quickly put his phone down and wiped my tears away. He was awake, and I knew he would want to talk. I didn't know if I was ready to hear more, but I knew I couldn't let this go unanswered. Henry came into the kitchen, looking at me like he wasn't sure how to approach me. He hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you," he said, his voice soft but filled with guilt. I looked at him, my heart still pounding with anger. "Sorry? Is that all you have to say? You slept with my sister, Henry. My own sister. How can you be sorry for that?" He looked down, unable to meet my gaze. "It wasn't supposed to happen. It was a mistake. It just happened. I never meant for things to go this far." "A mistake?" I could feel the bitterness rising in my chest. "You're telling me that you accidentally slept with my sister? You're telling me that this was just some mistake?" He didn't respond immediately, and I could see the struggle on his face as he tried to find the right words. "I didn't mean to fall in love with her, but I did," he said finally. The words hit me like a physical blow. "I never wanted to hurt you, but I was drawn to her. It's not something I can explain. Drawn to her." My voice shook with emotion. "You're telling me that you were in love with her, that you had feelings for her? How long have you been feeling this way?" "A few months. It started after the conference. I didn't know how to stop it, how to make it right. I tried to keep it from you, but I couldn't. It was eating me up inside." I shook my head in disbelief. "So, what now? You think you can just say you're sorry and everything will be fine?" He looked at me with pleading eyes. "No, I know I've ruined everything, and I'll do whatever it takes to fix it. I'm willing to fight for us, for our marriage. I'm willing to try if you'll let me." His words hung in the air between us, and I felt my mind racing, torn between the man I had loved for so many years and the man who had betrayed me in the worst way possible. There was no simple answer, no easy fix. But there was one thing I knew for sure. I couldn't go on like this. The trust, the love, it had been shattered in a way that couldn't be repaired overnight. And as I stood there, facing the reality of what had happened, I realized that it was time to make a decision. A decision that would change the course of my life forever. The past months had been a whirlwind of emotional turbulence, but as I sit here holding my daughter in my arms, I know without a doubt that I've made the right decision. Henry's betrayal, his arrogance, and his disregard for both me and our unborn child have led me to this point, but now I can finally breathe easy. When I think back on all the lies, the manipulation, and the blame he tried to place on me, it feels like a distant memory. The man I once loved, the man who was supposed to stand by me, has revealed himself to be someone completely different, a coward, selfish, and incapable of facing the consequences of his own actions. It's a relief to know that I no longer have to fight for a love that never existed in the first place. The truth of the matter is, I've never been alone. My family, especially my parents, have been my rock through all of this. I will forever be grateful for my father, who not only defended me physically but also gave me the strength to stand up for myself emotionally. Watching him chase Henry out of the house was a defining moment, not just for me, but for my daughter as well. She will grow up knowing that the men in our lives should never disrespect us, and that there's no place for anyone who doesn't have our backs. Henry, on the other hand, has been silent for the past few weeks, a shadow of the man he once was. The confidence and arrogance he used to wear like armor have all but crumbled. I can only imagine how difficult it must be for him to come to terms with the reality of what he has lost. His affair with Lexi, his disregard for his responsibilities, and his attempt to play the victim have all led him down a path of isolation. He no longer has the luxury of being surrounded by family or friends. Even his own parents have disowned him, vowing to leave him out of their inheritance and putting the child at the forefront of their concern. It's a small but satisfying piece of justice in a world where too often people get away with their wrongdoings. As for Lexi, her apologies came too late to make any difference. I've made peace with the fact that my sister betrayed me in the worst possible way. There will be no reconciliation between us. But in a twisted way, I'm glad she left Henry. She's just another casualty of his lies, and now, neither of them has anyone to turn to. My daughter is my world now. Henry's role in her life is limited to what the law demands, child support. But as far as I'm concerned, he can keep his distance. I don't need him, and neither does she. I have everything I need right here. The love of my family, the support of my parents, and the joy of raising a daughter who will grow up knowing what true love and respect really look like. I've learned so much through this ordeal, lessons that no one should ever have to learn. I've learned the importance of standing up for myself, of knowing my worth, and of walking away from toxic relationships that drag me down. Most of all, I've learned that I am stronger than I ever gave myself credit for. As for the future, I'm not sure where life will take me, but I know one thing for certain: I will never let anyone make me feel small again. My daughter will grow up surrounded by love, and I will make sure she knows that she is the most important thing in this world. And as for Henry and Lexi, they can continue living their sad, self-made lives. They've already lost everything that truly matters, and that's something they'll never get back. It's been almost a year since everything fell apart, and I'm doing well. My daughter is thriving, and I have no regrets about my decision to divorce Henry. He hasn't tried to make any more contact, and as far as I'm concerned, he can stay out of my life. His actions and his lies have cost him more than he'll ever know. I'm happy I'm strong, and I'm raising my daughter to be just as strong as I am. The future is bright, and it's mine to shape. I couldn't ask for more.